Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our fifth installment of the Birch Project's 10 training modules on supporting youth in schools and the community. Trainings for paraprofessionals and mentors. Skill building at Tier 2 and Tier 3. Adding to your intervention toolbox. In this module, we will take the information we have learned from the first 4 trainings to inform our decisions on what interventions we can use at Tier 2 and Tier 3 and how we use them. We will also provide resources for finding new interventions. So before we begin with our content, I would like to introduce the Birch Project to those of you joining us for the first time for this module series. The Birch Project is the behavioral health integrated resources for children project. Its mission is to provide professional development and resources for schools, as well as to strengthen coordination of behavioral health supports across school and community agencies. The Birch Project is led by faculty members from UMass Boston and UMass Amherst, and is sponsored by Boston Children's Hospital. For more information, please check out our website at umb.edu/birch. My name is Whitney Walker, and I'm a recent graduate from the school psychology program at UMass Boston. Majority of my research has involved improving the behavioral health systems for students, and I'm excited to be here to present this module today. We would also like to extend a huge thank you to the paraprofessionals and mentors who made these modules possible. They provided us with invaluable insight into the work that they do, which helped us develop the module you are about to view. The learning objectives of this module are for participants to 1, name 1 or 2 Tier 2 and 3 intervention strategies to add to their toolbox. 2, understand the importance of progress monitoring. And 3, to understand how to be an advocate for youth using a culturally responsive and trauma-informed lens. Today, we will review some of the foundational information that we learned in the previous modules, including a review of what Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions are. Then we will go over 6 different interventions and what they could look like at both Tiers 2 and 3. And finally, we will conclude by discussing why progress monitoring is important for all interventions to gauge how effective and appropriate the intervention is. So if all of you attended the last training, Module 4, Skill Building at Tiers 2 and 3, setting the stage for intervention implementation, you learned quite a bit about what it takes to implement interventions at Tiers 2 and 3. Notably, we hope you took away 1, that collaboration is important in determining goals for skill building. 2, that there are various methods of skill instruction that can be delivered in small groups or one-to-one. 3, consulting with others is beneficial for students' progress on our own well-being as staff. And 4, a system of documentation can help us advocate for youth. So I would like to take a second to remind everyone about the importance of relationship building. We learned that relationships are a critical prevention strategy. Building a connection and relationship with another person helps to inform your practice with that person, whether it's an adult or youth. When you know someone better and there is a mutual trust and respect built in the relationship, it becomes easier to learn what is helpful, unhelpful, offensive, or even triggering for that person. We can learn about our strengths of the youth and their families and build off of them in our interactions and plans to support them. Get to know who your youth goes to for support at home or in the community. Are they connected to a team or after school program or another mentor? What do they do for fun? What and who matters to them? All of this information is all of this information allows you to make decisions that are culturally responsive and trauma informed. The bottom line is that when a child has stable and supportive relationships with their caregivers, such as yourself, their outcomes are better in life. Relationships deeply matter and they foster resiliency and are a protective factor for youth. Even if the youth does not have a stable and positive relationship at home or in the community, their relationship with staff at school can make a difference in their lives. As we go through these slides, keep in mind these questions about culturally responsive and trauma-informed practices, and think about what you are doing at your school that align or maybe need some support around to ensure that the practices are culturally responsive and trauma-informed. So let's remember to ask ourselves, how can you individualize practices for your population? How can you make sure that what you're doing is relevant to your student? Are you checking your own biases? And are you comfortable and confident in the decisions you are making? So let's review the MTSS model that we are using. The bottom of this triangle represents the Tier 1 universal supports that are provided to all the youth. In that group, about 75 to 90% of the youth respond to interventions that are provided to everybody. The yellow portion represents Tier 2, which are classroom and small group strategies. These youth need additional support, which represents roughly 10 to 25% of the youth. And at the top of the triangle is Tier 3, targeted supports for about 3 to 5% of the youth who need more intensive supports. This module will continue to focus on tiers 2 and 3 and interventions appropriate for youth who need additional support on top of the universal services that are provided to all students. So we're going to dive a little deeper into what Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions are. To review, what are Tier 2 supports? Tier 2 supports are targeted systems and practices focused largely on small group intervention. Their goal is to improve school-wide and individual student outcomes. So Tier 2 supports are used to increase the pro-social behaviors and academic engagement and decrease those challenging behaviors that may lead to things like discipline referrals. And what are Tier 3 supports? They are targeted systems and practices that focus on individual student outcomes and are for students who require a more intensive individualized support to improve their behaviors and academic outcomes. So Tier 3 supports are designed for and have proven to be successful with students with developmental disabilities, emotional and behavioral disorders, and even students who do not have a diagnostic label. So as I stated, we're going to go over 6 different interventions that can be used at tiers 2 and 3 and highlight how they can be adapted. So I want to be sure to mention that these are not the only evidence-based interventions that can be used with children. These interventions are only a small portion of what's out there. So I encourage you all to try these out, as well as explore the different options that are available. And at the end, we list some resources to find other interventions as well. So additionally, it is important to keep in mind that these interventions can and should be adapted for the group or the individual student. adapting culturally, linguistically, and to be sensitive to any previous traumas that the child may have experienced. In our own practice, we want to make sure that we're continuing to check our own biases, asking yourself if you're making decisions with a team, and are you comfortable and confident in the decisions that you're making? So let's be sure to keep those things in mind as we go through these interventions. We will start with self-monitoring. So, self monitoring promotes independence and self esteem, improves on task behaviors, self awareness, and self reflection. In order for this intervention to be taught, the problem behavior needs to be addressed with the student. That could be anything from poor attention and focus to following directions to coming to class prepared and completing assignments. Together, a system can be put in place and a chart can be made similar to the example here to track the progress of the skill or the behavior throughout the day. An agreed upon goal should be set between the student and the student's team. Some teams request parent signatures to make sure that everyone is on the same page about the student and including the student. And this can also be used as a nice progress monitoring tool as the data is already being collected and can be analyzed for different trends to kind of inform any changes that should be made to the intervention. So at tier 2, this can be implemented for several students in a classroom or a small group. And at tier 3, for more intensive supports, it can be individualized for one student or have more check-ins throughout the day than students on a tier 2 level intervention. You want to consider the developmental level and cognitive functioning of your student when you're deciding if a self-monitoring intervention is appropriate. So with younger students, they often struggle to monitor and keep track of their own behaviors. So they may benefit from a check-in, check-out procedure instead of self-monitoring interventions. Even older students may benefit from a self-monitoring intervention, need to be taught how to do this over time. They work towards meeting their goal of accurately recognizing or monitoring their own behavior as it compares to the staff's rating. So when might we use this? Maybe when students have poor attention, focus, and impulse control, when students are disorganized or scattered, or if they have trouble being prepared or forgetting materials or their homework, when a student is overly talkative or overly social, when students exhibit chronic or compulsive behaviors like tapping or making noise or things like that. And also we could use it when students demonstrate off-task behaviors or have difficulties attending. So let's read this case study. A student or several students you have been working with are interested in improving their overall classroom engagement. You've noticed these students struggling with issues, with issues related to executive functioning. How could you use self-monitoring tool to help the students address their needs? So this intervention in particular could address their needs by helping them to stay organized and visually see what they have done and what they still need to do. Next, we'll explore the visual schedules as a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. Visual schedules are another very, very widely used practice to help students. Visual schedules are used to provide more specific visual reminders of the routine, the agenda, and instructions for the daily activities. It's important to explain the schedule to the children and make sure that they know where to locate it, whether that is hanging on a wall or the door, or maybe even on their desk. And throughout the day, when students need a reminder, it can be easily referenced. Visual schedules have been proven to help visual learners and students with autism, English language learners, and students with executive functioning challenges. The intensity of the support can go from tier 2 to tier 3 for individual personalized schedules for students. This could mean having their own schedule at their desk or in their planner, or even a more detailed schedule for themselves that has additional details or information to the general classroom schedule. And visual reminders can be helpful in other settings as well, such as on the bus, in a cafeteria, at home, and within community settings. So looking at this case study, you are working with a student who has a hearing loss and notice that transitions can be difficult for them. How might a visual schedule be used in this situation? One solution could be reminding the student in advance notice that the transition is coming up, by getting their attention and letting them know that they have, let's say, 5 minutes left in an activity before moving on to the next activity, and pointing out on their visual schedule what the next activity is. Next, we'll look at reward systems as an intervention at tier 2 or tier 3. Reward systems can be used universally in a whole school or at tier 2 or tier 3. They are used to provide students with positive feedback by getting a reward and reinforcing positive behaviors and expectations. In this example, we're going to use a token economy system, but know that there are other ways to reward system, other ways to reward system, other ways that reward systems can be created and work also. After establishing a goal and a desired reward, the students earn tokens, check marks, or stickers, anything like that, towards their reward. So throughout the process, you want to praise the students for their expected behaviors. And once they reach their goal, the reward can be something inexpensive and or small, such as stickers, pencils, a preferred snack, lunchtime with preferred staff, things like that. The same token economy can be used for multiple students in the classroom or grade who require additional support. Rewards could be delivered in small groups as well. So for example, if everyone in the group reaches their goal 4 out of 5 days out of the week, the group gets gym time or lunch with preferred staff or whatever the agreed upon reward is. This can be intensified for tier 3 by individualizing it for just one student. Here is a short video clip with a good example.
Today, I'd like to talk about token economy. Token economy is a reward system with tokens that are contingent on the target behavior. The earned tokens can be exchanged for the selected reinforcers. Here's the typical token board. It says, I'm working for blank, and this is where you put the picture of the reinforcer. You should know what the child likes before implementing token economy, or it is not going to be effective. When the child engages in an appropriate behavior, he or she earns a token and then we place it in the box. In all boxes and in the back of the cards, I put Velcro so the cards stick on the board. Let's say that a child likes Play-Doh and he wants to work for it. And let's say that he earns a token by reading one page of a book. He reads the first page and he earns the first token. He reads the second page and he earns the second token. When he reads the fourth page and then we say something like, "Good job, you earned Play-Doh," and then we deliver the reinforcer. I put 4 token boxes here, but the number of the boxes should be determined by the capability of the child. If the child has no idea what tokens are, you should probably start with just a few boxes. As the child understands the concept and starts working for the tokens, you can gradually increase them. I also put Velcro on the back of the board, so I don't have to look for the tokens or the reinforcer cards. I hope this helps you understand how to use tokens. Thank you for watching the video.
Okay, so when should we use things like a token economy? This can be useful when students exhibit chronic behavioral problems, demonstrate low and persistent motivation, effort, and interest. When students refuse to do work or follow behavioral guidelines, when they're oppositional or defiant, when students have poor attention and focus, or maybe they're impulsive, maybe they consistently fail to meet the behavioral or academic expectations, students who frequently break the school and classroom rules, or when students have difficulty getting along with others and interact inappropriately with others, or when students have frequent, incomplete, and missing work. These are just some examples of when a token economy might be useful as an intervention at either tiers 2 or 3. So let's look at another case study where we can use a token economy to help support pro-social behaviors. So Eric is a 5th grader at Sever Elementary School. He has been having difficulty with his impulse control in the classroom. He often will blurt out answers or try to talk with other students during lesson time. What do you think the functions of his behavior is? How might a reward system be used to help Eric develop his impulse control and seek connection appropriately? Well, a reward system will help Eric consistently monitor his progress towards his desired rewards. It can be implemented in such a way that every time he appropriately raises his hand to answer a question, he gets a sticker. And when he gets 5 stickers on his chart, he can choose a friend to take a 3-minute break with. Now, this is something that is cost effective. It doesn't necessarily have to cost anything at all, but it is a preferred activity for Eric to get that attention that he's seeking with his peer in an appropriate way. Next, we will look at daily behavior report cards and how they might be used as an intervention at tier 2 or 3. The daily behavior form can be created to look however you want it to look, really. I will go through why you might want to use it, how, and what it looks like at tiers 2 and 3. Teachers use it to provide structure, routine, consistency, organization, and promote self-responsibility. Staff complete these ratings. And so to do so, a problem behavior needs to be identified among the team of staff working with the student. Then the team should explain the procedures to the student as follows. The student will get a form each day that they will be rated on the specific behavior for a certain amount of time. This is where the behavior and the time increments can be individualized based on the student's need. At the end of the day, the form will go home with the student and may require a signature from the caregiver and to be reviewed with the student. This keeps open communication between the school and home as well. At the end of the day, the student can review areas of strength and areas of improvement for the next day. Rewards at home or school are built into the daily behavior report card, depending on the ratings earned with the input from the youth. So for tier 2, a group of students with similar areas of improvement may benefit from the same intervention. And tier 3 would focus more on one student or a group of students that need more intensive supports, possibly a greater frequency in rating than they would at the tier 2 level. Some examples of when you might use this would be when students exhibit persistent behavior problems, are unorganized, consistently fail to complete daily classroom or school requirements, when students exhibit persistent emotional difficulties like frustration or anxiety, or possibly when students are defiant or oppositional. And this is just one example here of what a daily behavior card can look like, but it really should be personalized, especially with developmental levels. So maybe a high schooler would not need a report card that has smiley faces on it, but this could be something that's very useful for a younger student or somebody who has a lower developmental level. So, do you remember the case study for Module 2 with Jackson? Well, here it is. Let's review the observed behaviors for a minute. Jackson's observed behaviors included refusal to stay in his seat, picking on other students and staff, stealing from others, bolting from the classroom, hiding under his desk, and refusing to communicate or explain his reasoning for doing so. Yelling, "You're kidding, this is so stupid, I'm not doing that," etc., when given directions to complete a task, and headbanging. Now, what are 3 example items that could be created for a daily behavior form based on Jackson's observed behaviors? This is a 9 Likert scale going from never or seldom to usually or always, with sometimes in the middle. You're rating Jackson's behavior in every class on this scale. What behavior or behaviors are you going to rate? Maybe staying in his seat, staying in the classroom, or being kind to others? And this tool easily monitors progress because all of the data is being collected already. You can track the trend of the behaviors and determine if anything needs to be changed or modified. And once the student masters one behavior, you can move to another or even ease out of the intervention implementation altogether. So a very common intervention is check in, check out, which we will look into next. People use check in, check out to improve student accountability and behavior and to provide feedback and support. The way it works is by first identifying an adult for the child to check in with every day. This goes back to the idea of establishing relationships with the students and the importance of what that is, of the establishment of the relationship as a preventative strategy. So sometimes the teacher is not the student's preferred staff, and oftentimes it is a support staff. So next, you'd want to explain the procedure to or with the student about how the process is going to work. that the student will see the identified staff when they get in at the beginning of the day, and then again at the end of the day. During those check-ins, the staff will provide the student with encouragement at the beginning of the day and then feedback at the end of the day. Ratings earned throughout the day are reviewed and rewards are delivered if agreed upon ratings are earned. So this can be done at tier 2 with a group of students identified with the same areas of support that are needed, or with one student with one individualized procedures. So for example, check-in, check-out can be intensified by having multiple check-ins in a day with a student instead of one when they arrive and once before they leave. Similar to the engagement strategies at tier 1, we want to make sure this interaction is positive, encouraging, and reinforcing of the pro-social behaviors. So when are there times that you should use check-in, check-out as an intervention where attention, connection, or help seeking is the function of the behavior? When students exhibit persistent behavior problems, are very unorganized, consistently fail to complete daily class or school requirements, exhibit persistent emotional difficulties like frustration or anxiety, and or when students are defiant and oppositional. So, how might check in, check out be designed and implemented to be culturally responsive and trauma informed? One example might be using a hand signal or a set of hand gestures with a student. This is something that can be developed between that identified staff and the student. So, our last intervention is small group social emotional learning or social skills training for tiers 2 and 3. So, small group social emotional learning or social skills training groups are a great way to reinforce the skills that may have been taught universally to the entire school or the classroom. These groups are important because they teach students essential life skills. They provide students and staff with common language and encourage the shared values, and teaches students to follow rules, expectations, and procedures. So this can be achieved by first providing universal instructions of the skill to all students. Then, once you have determined the students who may need additional support around that specific area, you can give an additional lesson to a group of students as a tier 2 intervention or an individual student for a tier 3 intervention. Additionally, you can have a small group of students deliver the lessons more frequently and customize the lessons for those students' specific needs. And it would be considered a tier 3 intervention based on the intensity of the support. So the lessons that are taught at tiers 2 and tier 3 levels should be in addition to the lessons that has already been taught universally to all the students, but around the specific areas of need for those identified students. So whatever they're needing support around, in addition to what um, what lessons were taught universally. Here are a list of some of the other social emotional learning curriculum that can be used at all levels of the 3-tiered model, and then can be adapted for tiers 2 or 3. So we will conclude this module with progress monitoring and why it is important when implementing an intervention. So we talked about how it's important to make sure that the child's basic needs are met before assessing behaviors. We do that to make sure that the behavior is not coming from an unmet basic need. And if all other needs are met and we intervene, we're hoping to meet whatever additional need that the child has in order to develop more adaptive behaviors. So our main goal is to have the child feel better, which leads to more positive outcomes. When progress monitoring, we can make sure of that with recorded data. It can be used as a guide to help determine if the intervention should be continued, modified, or discontinued. With progress monitoring, intervention results are more efficient because the supports are aimed to the appropriate areas to meet the child's needs. Additionally, the act of progress monitoring allows for culturally responsive and trauma informed decisions to be made around the goal, as well as the continuation and modifications of the intervention. So that brings us to the end of our module. If I had to name three big takeaways from the module, we hope that you learned that one, with culturally responsive and trauma informed strategies, interventions can be adapted to be used at tiers 2 or 3, depending on the need of the student. Two, not one intervention is going to work for all students, small groups, or individuals. And progress monitoring will ensure that the intervention is actually helping. Three, taking a culturally responsive and trauma-informed approach helps us to better advocate for youth. Throughout the module, we went through 6 different interventions, but there are so many more out there. So here are additional resources that can be used to find appropriate interventions at each of the tiers. So I encourage you to go explore these interventions even before searching for interventions for a specific kid. That way you'll have an idea of how to find them and what different kinds of interventions are available. Here are the references that were used to create this module. And thank you for attending the 5th module. Please complete the evaluation form by visiting the link on the slide. We would love to hear from you. And at our website, www.umb.edu/birch, you can sign up for our subscription list to get more information on best practices related to supporting the behavioral health needs and well-being of youth. Again, we'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us if you have thoughts or questions. And thank you for all that you do to support the well-being of the youth.